when you graduate Elon University and you're just starting out, what happens from that point on to then, you're rebounding for Steph Curry and you're attending Kobe Bryant's workouts. So like, what was the gap that allowed you to get from just a D2 college basketball player to watching the best of the best and coaching the best of the best?
Well, you have to keep in mind from a time standpoint, when I graduated school and left Elon in 1999, at that time, less than 1/3 of NBA teams even had a strength and conditioning consultant. So the basketball performance industry, if you will, was really just starting. Tim Grover had made some waves as being Michael Jordan's trainer. And there were a few other people that had a little bit of notoriety. But for the most part, this was something that was brand new. And at that time, when I was graduating, I thought that I wanted to train NBA players, that is exactly the path that I wanted to be on. Well, there happened to be a gentleman that lived here where I was from, a suburb of Washington, D.C., here in Rockville, Maryland, that had trained and did train several NBA players. He somehow, and I always am fascinated by relationships. He somehow was friends with a guy named David Falk. And David Falk was probably the first super agent, especially in the NBA. David Falk represented Michael Jordan, Patrick Ewing, Lonzo Mourning, Coach K, John Thompson, the former coach at Georgetown. I mean, he had just a remarkable roster of clients that he represented as an agent. And somehow those two had become friends. And I don't quite remember how they connected. But basically, any of the new players that David Falk signed, this gentleman would start to train. And a good portion of them came from Georgetown. And where I live is maybe 30 minutes from Georgetown University. So, all of the best players coming out of Georgetown would train with him. And, at that time when Georgetown was a powerhouse in the Big East, I mean, they were putting players in the NBA every single year. So I realized that this trainer who worked where I was from was training NBA players. And I thought, well, if that's what I want to do, I need to go work for this guy. So I basically hunted him down and said, look, I need to work for you. I don't care if it's unpaid. I don't care if you have me sweeping the floor, folding towels, whatever you need me to do. I just need to be around you and I need to be around this. And when there's something that I really want, I'm usually fairly decent at the art of persuasion. And I kind of talked him in to taking me under his wing. And, at this time, I had a decent amount of theoretical and academic knowledge because I was studying constantly how to train athletes, but I was still very green when it came to working with athletes in person. So at first, I was kind of like his apprentice, his assistant, an intern, if you will, and would do everything that he asked. And slowly over time, I think he saw my enthusiasm. He saw my dedication to the craft. He saw how bad I wanted this. He would slowly start giving me some opportunities like, hey, I'm going to work these guys out. If you can spot them on this one exercise, that would be great. And then that would turn into, hey, I'm going to work these guys out. Before I do, if you can take them through their warm up, that would be great. And then, within a year, it became, I'm going to work these two guys out. Will you work these other two guys out at the same time? So I can kind of keep an eye on you while you're doing it. And then very soon that just came to, hey, I don't have room in my schedule. So now you can start training these players yourself. And I'm so thankful for that opportunity. I mean, I got to cut my teeth very early in my career with some elite level players. And I don't ever mention them because they were not my clients. So that's why that's usually not written in my bio line. But that was incredibly impactful and helpful. And then I decided to kind of break away from him after a couple of years and start my own thing and start my own training company. But at that time, I had realized after those couple of years that I actually did not want to work with NBA players, that my true passion was working with middle school and high school age players. And I say this very respectfully. I found that working with NBA players oftentimes was more of a babysitting job. It was more of a, we said we're going to train at 10 and you end up showing up at 11:30. So I've been twiddling my thumbs for 90 minutes waiting for you. And I didn't like that. And I actually felt that I could make much more of an impression and be more of a role model with kids that were in middle school or high school age. So I kind of left that specific genre and went into the high school age and really focused on that for the next almost 20 years, which is where I did most of my work. But the parallel, the through line that connected me to a Steph Curry or a Kobe Bryant or a LeBron James or a Kevin Durant was I was able to work at two different high schools here in the DC area, Montrose Christian, which is where Kevin Durant graduated from, and DeMatha Catholic High School, which is where Victor Oladipo graduated from. So I was able to work with some future NBA players at the high school level. And that got me some contract work with Nike basketball, with Jordan Brand, with USA basketball. And that's what opened up the doors for me to work many of those academies and camps for some of the players that you see behind me now. So, but that only happened because I was very focused on doing the best I could with middle school and high school age players. And the only slight caveat to that was I did do some pre-draft training. There were a few agents that were in this area. They knew I had experience working with some NBA guys, but they also knew that I was working with future NBA guys. So every year when the draft came around, for like 6 to 8 weeks before the draft, they would bring their players into DC to live here to get ready for pre-draft. So that was when I met Stephen Curry for, after I had a chance to work with him at a skills academy. That was where I got to do some more intense work with him and a few different other players. So that's kind of how the whole thing just slowly unfolded. But really the lessons to pull from that are, find the very specific niche that you believe you'll be the most impactful and influential and potentially most successful. And then, star where you are. I was very thankful to work with middle school and high school age kids. I wasn't consumed with, well, I need to be working with NBA players to validate who I am as a coach.
Going back to that first part of the story, when you just get your way in the door by telling the trainer at the time, like, I need to work for you, I'll do whatever it takes. What did you specifically say to persuade him to give you an opportunity?
Well, I think part of it was I impressed him very early because at the time I was still living down at Elon, which is 4.5, 5 hours away from the DC area. And you have to keep in mind, yes, we had email, but we weren't using it in 99 to the degree that we're using it now. I mean, it was one of those things where if you got an email of substance, you were actually surprised that you got an email. And it was harder to find people's email addresses. People still did things by good old fashioned handwritten letters and a lot of things by fax, which I know sounds so archaic. Even cell phones at the time were basically flip phones. And this was even pre-text. Like you still weren't able to text someone in 1999. So from Elon, I wrote him a couple of letters. I faxed him a couple of letters. I called the gym a few times and basically just kept saying like, look, this is something I need to do. When do you have a few moments to meet with me? And I think he said it more of a test or more of a dare, but he basically said, I can make time for you tomorrow around lunchtime. And I'm talking to him, that's less than 24 hours away. And I said, sure, that works. And I hopped in my car and I drove 5 hours. And again, I'm not trying to build myself up into anything bigger. I didn't drive across the country, on 5 minutes notice. Yeah, I drove 5 hours, but I basically drove 5 hours for an impromptu lunch meeting. And then after the meeting, I drove 5 hours straight back. And, I think that in and of itself, whether he intentionally did it as a test or not, basically said, okay, this kid wants it. He's hungry. He's written me several letters. He's called several times. He's faxed me several letters. And now on a moment's notice, he'll drive 5 hours for a 45-minute lunch interview, if you will. Okay, this is the type of kid I need to have around. So I don't think there was anything special about me. I just think that I really impressed him with kind of my grit initially. And that's what opened up the door.
What do you think made you so clear on your vision that this was the path for you?
Well, basketball was definitely my first love. And I fell in love with the game, in kindergarten when my parents signed me up for my first recreation team. So I knew that I loved the game of basketball. And then as I matriculated up in high school and I knew that I was going to play in college, I started to have an equal affinity for strength and conditioning. I had the strength shoes, the old platform shoes that they had 20, 30 years ago that people used to improve their vertical jump. And, I would jump rope for hours a day. And I was really into trying to build my body up to become a better player. So I really fell in love with the performance side, the strength, the conditioning, the nutrition, the mindset. So when I was graduating, Elon, I figured what in the world could be better than combining my original love of basketball with my new love of strength and conditioning. And even though it was rather untapped and unproven at the time, as I said, there weren't very many people doing it. I just couldn't think of anything better. At that time, I felt that the only way you could become a basketball coach was to also be a teacher. So, originally I went to Elon thinking I want to be a high school coach. And I thought the only path to do that was to be a teacher by day and a basketball coach by night. So I actually started as an elementary ed major. And after a couple of years realized I was not very passionate about the teaching part, that I did not want to be a teacher. All I wanted to do was coach basketball. And I was not aware of anyone that just coached basketball for a living that didn't have another job. So that was what kind of pushed me to being, well, I could be a full-time trainer. And at the time, you're basically a personal fitness trainer. You just tried to train as many basketball players as you could. That was about the best you could do. But because I was so into fitness for myself and nutrition, I figured, wow, this seems like a pretty good life. In theory, I'm gonna learn from this guy, but I'm not really entering a vocation where I'm gonna have a boss. I'm not really entering a vocation where I work from 9 to 5. I'm not entering a vocation where I have to wear a tie and sit in a cubicle. So as I'm checking these things off as kind of a younger knucklehead, I was like, man, what could be better than being in a gym all day long with people that want to improve their health and fitness? Sold. I'm done. That's it. This is all I want to do.